In the vast emptiness of Albuquerque's West Mesa, where the desert wind moves like a whisper carrying secrets no one wants to hear, investigators would one day uncover a nightmare buried beneath the sand. 11 women and girls whose lives vanished quietly, whose bones surfaced only because a stormwater pond shifted the earth enough to reveal the truth. It is a discovery that still haunts the city decades later, a mystery wrapped in fear, silence, and shadows, because although all the victims have been identified, the killer responsible for this sprawling graveyard has never been found, and somewhere, even now, he may still be walking among the living. But to understand how this chilling discovery came to light, one must start with the women themselves, the lives stolen long before the rest of the world ever knew their names. They were daughters, sisters, young mothers, and teenagers standing at the fragile edge of adulthood. Most were Hispanic, many struggling with poverty, addiction, or the unforgiving pull of street life. But they were also full human beings with hopes that stretched further than their circumstances ever allowed. Among them was 15-year-old Selania Edwards, a runaway from Oklahoma, the only African-American victim, barely old enough to understand the dangers of the world she had stepped into. There was Evelyn Salazar, 27, who had a little girl waiting at home. Michelle Valdez, just 22 and pregnant when she disappeared. And Cinnamon Elks, 32, known affectionately to friends but lost to a lifestyle that swallowed her whole. Their lives intersected through vulnerability, but they did not deserve what awaited them in the silence of the desert. Their stories, once dismissed as disappearances from the margins of society, would return with horrifying force in 2009, when the West Mesa decided it could no longer keep its secrets buried. The night this nightmare truly began was not a single night at all, but a repeating cycle between 2001 and 2005, when somewhere in the darkness, a predator moved with confidence, precision, and terrifying consistency. The burial site, nothing but undeveloped desert back then, sat within Albuquerque city limits, but far enough from watchful eyes to allow someone to operate with chilling ease. Under the cover of night, he transported his victims to the arroyo banks, dug shallow graves, and left their remains beneath the sand. He returned again and again, month after month, year after year, always choosing women whose disappearances drew little media attention, who were trapped in lives that made them easy targets and easier to overlook. The killer seemed to know which women were least protected, least believed when they vanished. He moved like someone comfortable in the area, someone who knew he would not be interrupted. And then, strangely, inexplicably, the burials stopped in 2005, coinciding almost perfectly with the beginning of housing development on the west side. Construction crews moved into the region, roads were surveyed, and plans were drawn for new neighborhoods. The quiet desert was no longer quiet. The killer, whoever he was, had lost his sanctuary. But before anyone could uncover the horrors beneath the soil, the housing bubble collapsed in 2008. Construction halted mid-project. Empty streets lined unfinished structures, the skeletons of a dream frozen in time. Residents complained of flooding issues, prompting the city to build a retaining wall. The wall redirected stormwater into a retention pond, unintentionally softening the buried graves, exposing the first bones. The desert that had once hidden everything was now slowly giving the victims back. On February 2, 2009, a woman walking her dog stumbled upon what she first believed to be a bone from an animal, bleached white by the sun. But something about it felt wrong. She called the police. Detectives arrived, surveyed the area, and within minutes realized the truth. The bone was human. Then investigators widened the search and made a horrifying discovery. More remains, more bones, more burial pits. What began as a single find became one of the largest crime scenes in New Mexico history. 11 victims, 11 lives that had quietly disappeared from the city's consciousness, now resurfacing in the harsh light of day. As forensic teams sifted through the sandy soil, they identified the victims one by one. Jamie Barella, just 15, Monica Candelaria, 21, Victoria Chavez, 26, Virginia Cloven, 24, Selania Edwards, 15, Cinnamon Elks, 32, Doreen Marquez, 27, Julie Nieto, 23, Veronica Romero, 27, Evelyn Salazar, 27, and Michelle Valdez, 22, along with her unborn child. The desert had become a graveyard for a decade, and no one had known. The public was horrified. How could 11 women and a fetus disappear in a single city without anyone connecting the pattern? Why were their disappearances dismissed as isolated incidents instead of a larger coordinated nightmare? The early leads were overwhelming and terrifying. Detectives examined old missing persons cases, scoured police reports, and tried desperately to reconstruct the victims' final days. Most were involved in sex work or struggling with substance abuse, factors that made their disappearances easier to overlook. But investigators quickly realized something else. The killer knew this. The killer selected victims who existed in society's blind spots. He understood how to exploit the gaps in the system, and that knowledge made him even more dangerous. As the investigation grew, so did the web of possible suspects. Early on, the police explored several promising leads: men who had interacted with the victims, men known in the underground worlds the victims moved through. But the more they investigated, the murkier the truth became. Some suspects seemed promising at first, only to unravel upon deeper scrutiny. One early red herring was Fred Reynolds, a pimp who reportedly had photographs of several missing sex workers. He seemed like someone who might have connections to the victims, someone who at least might know the darker pathways of the city's streets. But before investigators could fully interrogate him, he died in January 2009, just weeks before the bones were discovered. His death raised alarms, but without evidence linking him to the burial site, he faded from focus. Another potential suspect was photographer and businessman Ron Irwin, whose fascination with the Albuquerque State Fair put him on law enforcement's radar. In 2010, police raided his Missouri properties and confiscated tens of thousands of photos. The images featured women who resembled some of the West Mesa victims. It was enough to ignite public fear, but ultimately, Irwin was cleared entirely. His odd behavior not criminal, just eccentric. Then came the investigation into convicted serial killer Scott Lee Kimball, whose violent past made him an obvious target for scrutiny. Kimball denied any involvement, and investigators found no evidence linking him to the crimes. Each lead seemed promising, only to crumble under forensic analysis, alibis, or lack of connection. The investigation was a maze of shadows and almost answers, every path leading to a dead end. The killer seemed to vanish just as effectively as he had hidden his victims. But then, deeper, more chilling suspects emerged, men whose histories, locations, and behaviors suggested far more than coincidence. The first was Lorenzo Montoya, a man with a violent reputation and a disturbing proximity to the burial site. He lived less than 3 miles from where the bodies were discovered. In 2006, dirt trails connected his trailer directly to the future crime scene. It was as though he had carved pathways into the desert himself. 2 sex workers had previously accused him of assault. He had threatened to kill his girlfriend and bury her in lime, a chilling echo of what was later found on the Mesa. Co-workers claimed he had spoken openly about killing and burying women in the West Mesa area. And then came the most disturbing detail. In December 2006, Montoya strangled a teenage sex worker in his trailer. But before he could dispose of her body, the woman's boyfriend burst into the trailer and shot Montoya dead. And here is the part investigators still whisper about today. The West Mesa murder stopped after Montoya died. Not slowed, not reduced, stopped completely. But Montoya's death meant that if he were the killer, he would never confess, never explain, never bring closure to the families. Some detectives quietly believe Montoya was the West Mesa bone collector. Others argue that too much uncertainty remains. Without hard evidence, the truth died with him. The second major suspect was even more disturbing. Joseph Blee, known in Albuquerque as the mid-school rapist. Throughout the 1980s, he broke into the homes of girls aged 13 to 15, assaulting them in the dark, while leaving behind a trail of trauma that would follow his victims for decades. Blee was also suspected in the 2015 murder of a sex worker after his DNA was found on her waistband. His connection to the West Mesa victims grew stronger when investigators discovered a tree tag near the burial site traced back to a nursery Blee frequented. During a search of his home, police found jewelry and women's underwear that did not belong to his wife or daughter, items that felt like trophies. After being imprisoned in 2015 for his prior rape cases, Blea reportedly confessed to a cellmate that he knew the West Mesa victims and had hired them. But Blea denies involvement in the killings, and his alleged confession remains unverified. He is alive, incarcerated, and maintains his innocence, and the police still lack enough evidence to charge him. These suspects, dead, imprisoned, or cleared, form a chilling pattern. Men capable of violence, men steeped in the worlds the victims came from, men with proximity and motive, yet none with sufficient proof to close the case. Each theory spirals into uncertainty, leaving a void where answers should be. The breakthrough evidence the police hoped for never truly materialized. Instead, they uncovered fragments, photographs of unidentified women released to the public, only for two of the women to later be found alive. More bones discovered in 2018, only to turn out to be ancient remains, haunting but unrelated. A $100,000 reward offering hope, yet bringing no new information. The deeper the police searched, the more the mystery widened. And then investigators began exploring another angle entirely: sex trafficking. The victims' profiles, the patterns of disappearance, the quiet movement of vulnerable women through the city's underbelly, all pointed to the possibility that the killer was part of or connected to trafficking networks. Someone who knew how to identify, exploit, and erase women without leaving a trail. Someone who could blend into normalcy by day and prey on the forgotten by night. The theory remains active today, one that paints a chilling picture. If the killer was tied to trafficking, he may not have acted alone. He may have been one predator within a larger, darker machine. The climax of the story remains suspended in unsolved tension. The city of Albuquerque has its theories, its suspects, its whispers that drift across the desert at night. Some believe the killer is dead, likely Montoya. Others insist he is alive, perhaps Blea, perhaps someone never named publicly. And still others fear the truth is far worse. The killer was never just one man, but part of a network that still operates in the shadows. The West Mesa bone collector case stands frozen in this eerie uncertainty, a puzzle missing its final piece. 11 women and a fetus were stolen, buried, forgotten, then unearthed by chance, not justice. The police continue to receive tips. Families continue to wait, and the desert continues to hold its breath. If the killer is alive, he has watched the world search for him for more than 15 years. He has slipped through every net. He has listened to every theory, and he has never once been caught. And so the case sits in the cold darkness, unresolved, unfinished, and terrifying. An open wound on the West Mesa, where the wind still blows across empty ground, carrying the unanswered question that chills every investigator who has ever worked on this case. Who buried these women, and why has he never been found?